Hey gardeners! So I thought it would be a good idea just to share with you sort of how I like to fertilize my starter plants, and also, if I'm growing indoors over the winter, what that looks like for feeding the plants in their tiny little pots. They will eventually run out. Outside in the ground where they're exposed to a lot more soil and moisture and stuff like that, it's a very different story, but those tiny little pots, we need to make sure we're giving them what they need to get through to actually be able to, 1, survive, 2, produce, and then 3, eventually be transplanted outside and be healthy enough that they kind of don't really skip a beat. Now, there's sort of 2 things I'm going to share with you today. My preference is using worm compost or vermicompost, worm castings, whatever you want to call it. It's so simple, so easy, and literally gold. Your plants just will go absolutely crazy for it. Now, I'm going to share with you what that looks like for my processes, and then also if you have worm castings, maybe you have a limited amount or maybe you don't have any at all, sort of what you could do to substitute that. I do have a worm bin, so it's really easy for me to kind of gather what I need from that. Also, my father-in-law's got lots of worms, so it is something that's easy to come by, and my plants have just they just love it. They just go crazy every time they get fed and planted into something that I've got a lot of vermicompost in. If you want to learn more about that, I have a whole course on composting with a bonus section on vermicomposting, but we won't get into that today. So what it looks like if I were to say be mixing up new starter plants, this bucket here, this is kind of my dirt mixing bucket, so to speak. If I were to fill this, say like half full with dirt, just to give some perspective, I would probably use about 3 scoops of this full of worm castings, and I would just mix it in really well. And I use this for my little starter plant pots. I mix up roughly the same for when I transplant, eventually into the much bigger pots. And it's kind of just something that I try to, every time I'm adding soil, I just want to make sure that I've got a little bit of worm castings mixed into that, because a little bit of worm castings goes a long way. This is also one of the reasons why I love it. And then in between that, supplementing for extra, or also for my house plants as well, I do this, is I'll mix worm castings right into my watering cans. So in this one, I'd probably use like, a big heaping spoonful in this, and in my big guy, I'd probably use like 2 heaping spoonfuls, and then I just sort of leave it sit for maybe half of a day or so, maybe give it a swish around, and then I'll water my plants with that, and just letting it soak for a bit sort of releases some of the nutrients, and I always sort of shake the watering can as I'm watering and pouring, because then it'll sort of deposit little amounts of worm castings throughout my pots. This wouldn't be considered like a worm tea. Worm tea involves like aeration and bubblers, and that's a bit of a different thing. But this is sort of like a halfway step to just spreading it around through your plants a little bit of an easier way. So that's sort of what I do. And that's pretty much my standard. It's very rare that I add in any extra supplementary fertilizers. But if you need to do that, you're feeling like you don't have enough worm compost, you don't have any, you're going to want to look for a liquid fertilizer. Is going to be ideal for seed starting, and I don't have any handy, so bear with me. We're just going to play pretend. This is a blood meal, bone meal that I'm holding right here, which is not water soluble. This is something that you sprinkle right into your soil, but really I just wanted to use this as an example for the numbers that are on the front here. So when you're actually shopping for whatever that organic liquid fertilizer is that you're going to use for your plants, generally speaking, I like to keep it on the simpler side, and just look for something that's balanced here to take the complication out of having to understand what your nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium and all that stuff is going to be. They do all have, appropriate applications at different times, but keep it really simple. Just go with a one that's as balanced as you can find. And as far as the numbers, like on here is a 7, 5, and a 0, so this is not balanced. Also a 7 and a 5 would be a little bit too high for baby seedlings. What you want is maybe like 1 to 2. That's about the max strength that you want to use for your seedlings, especially when you are like the little guys. They get shocked really easy. Liquid fertilizer is like an instant boost to the plant, and if you are too heavy-handed with it, you might kill your plant, or at the very least, you're just going to cause it some serious amount of stress. So if you can't find like a 1, 2, somewhere in that range, and it's 8 or 10 or 7 or whatever it is, just sort of dilute it down to the appropriate. Like you could use 1/4 of a dropper or even less than that if you need to, just like really, really proceed with caution. Just a little bit of comparison. Worm compost is very slow release. So I can feed a lot. I can put a pretty serious amount of this in the soil with my plants, and it's just going to slowly be taken up by the plant as the plant needs it. The other fun thing about mixing in worm compost is I'm bringing in lots of really good bacteria into my soil, and it's actually the bacteria that are like the little gatekeepers. They unlock all those nutrients for your plants. So it's sort of win-win. It also helps sort of keep moisture balance, keeps a little bit of aeration to the soil. So I like it for a lot of reasons, but mostly because it's like the easiest. Tons of really great nutrition, plant uptakes it in the way that it would like to, and it's easy for me to have on hand. I can reuse all of my house scraps for it. So it's kind of a bit of a broken record on that, but that is generally what I do and how I use it. And it's still, since I've been doing this with my seed starting and growing indoors for my like vegetable plants, it still kind of surprises me how quickly some of the plants like really, really take off in comparison to just using, say, like a straight potting soil. They sometimes outrun like my ability to keep up with transplanting, which is not a bad thing, that they're growing really well and that they're really happy. And the longer that you're growing inside, the more that you're going to just need to make sure that you are really supplementing, that that plant is not going to be starved for nutrients. And you can think about it maybe like its immune system, giving vitamins for immune system. You know, it's going to suffer at some point, and we don't want that to happen. We want it to just be super healthy all the way through. Eventually we stick it outside and it just sort of keeps on going without skipping a beat, basically. So that's kind of my process, super simple and easy. And if you want to learn about vermicomposting, send me a message and I can share some details and information in my mini course on that. But that is my absolute go-to. If you're looking for a liquid organic fertilizer, there are so many really great options out there now, which is super exciting. So I wish you guys a beautiful rest of your day. Happy planting, happy fertilizing, and we will see you again soon.